Fear itself is a great episode, and while it does little for the greater arcs of the season, it offers good insight into the characters and features more of Anya, which is always a plus. The episode is basically a remake of the season-wide episode Nightmares, which focused on the characters' fears being brought to life. Now, however, instead of clowns or becoming a vampire, they're much more grounded, like Xander's concerns about being forgotten, Buffy's of someone never loving her, and Willow of not being strong enough. First, the plot. Buffy is still heartbroken after Parker ditched her, and the gang encourage her to get out and party. Reluctantly, she agrees, and they head to a frat for a spooky fun time. Unfortunately, the frat has unwittingly carved an actual demonic sigil into the floor, and after Oz cuts himself doing some very shaky adjustments for his audio equipment, it turns all the fake scares into real ones. There's a bit of oddness here where some of the magic is personalized to the user, whereas others seem to be more generalized, and the props come to life and disappear basically at random, but Buffy's magic has never really been about consistency. Xander has had a few comments this season about being a civilian or seeming stuck in life, going from living in his parents' house to moving in the basement, seeming a step down. Anya comes into his life, points out these inadequacies, and he responds with a quip and deflection. While he pretends to be okay with the circumstances, it's clear there's something going on under the surface. In the funhouse, he turns invisible, literally, and is unable to be heard. In a way that confirms his fears, it takes the rest of the gang maybe 5 minutes to actually figure this out, with Buffy claiming it's always like him to abandon them. His arc for most of the rest of the season consists of dealing with these feelings, trying to find a place in the world, and working on his relationship with Anya. As stated previously, this is the first episode where she's really a focus. She talks to Xander about his and their future, and then when the rest of the gang is in danger, she goes to Giles and organizes a rescue operation. Part of the humor comes in twofold. The first is that her scary costume is a bunny suit. Maybe she saw Darnie Darko at the formative age of 1200. The second is that she is seemingly only concerned with Xander, not any of the other people in the house. This speaks to her larger personality. Anya is ultimately a very selfish person, who has not had to actually be a human for over a millennia. Now she's been thrust into a world which she doesn't really understand, but she's come to care for at least one thing: Xander. It's still not entirely clear why, although it's slowly revealed that it's his role as the heart of the group that got to her, in a roundabout way. Willow, on the other hand, is still dealing with the same fears she's had for years. Part of it is feeling inadequate, or not good enough. Here this takes the form of Buffy doubting her spellcasting abilities, which is compounded by the warnings that Giles has given her in previous seasons. While she claims that she is good enough and practiced, ultimately she's still an amateur, and throughout the rest of the series she'll deal with difficulties revolving around magic. Here it's her own self-doubts that cause a problem, as she successfully summons a little wisp of guiding light, but when she becomes indecisive it multiplies, becoming a swarm of buzzing insects. The use of power, knowing when and when not to use it, is a recurring theme of the season. Oz gets a pretty basic fear that'll be expanded on in a few episodes. He transforms into a werewolf, and doesn't want to. Oz is ultimately not a terribly complex character, and this makes sense, but it does feel like there was an opportunity to delve a bit deeper into his psyche that was passed up. Buffy's, on the other hand, expose her inner insecurities as she falls into a basement in front of a gravestone, which works both as her figurative hunting ground and the constant threat of death that she has to deal with as the Slayer. More than that, though, is the manifestation of one of the frat guys with a broken neck, mocking her about her friends leaving. Buffy's fear of being alone is central to her character, and drove her into some toxic relationships, as well as kept her in those. All of this is particularly raw as Parker just dumped her, and Angel left before him. The fear of being alone, of course, is one of the more universal ones, and after Buffy flees from the zombies, she reappears in the attic, where everyone else is. Again, magic is weird, but it seems like some or all of the scares they had been experiencing were just in their head, although the physical building closing off seems like not to be an actual illusion. In a moment that will later be featured in the opening, Giles busts through the door with a chainsaw, on saving duty. The ending is the one part of the episode that'll work well for some people, but not others. After Giles discovers the summoning ritual is not complete, he gives a list of things that can stop it. But first he says that destroying the symbol will, and then Buffy smashes it without hearing the rest. It turns out that it will immediately summon the demon in full. The whole timing of that is a bit suspect, but then there is a special effects show that reveals a Hellraiser-inspired monster. The only problem is, he's half a foot tall. After an episode relatively heavy on horror and depression, a comical ending can be a nice punctuation mark, a reward for surviving through it. In this case, I think they're successful, although some of that also comes from the final scene of the show, where Giles says he's translated the inscription, and the music builds up to a terrible revelation, that it said, actual size. That's one of the best jokes in the show, and makes the whole thing feel worthwhile. There's also a little nod to the season arc, as the military guys are briefly seen wandering around campus, although they're mistaken for people in costume. This fits in with what we later learn of the Initiative, who are overfunded but completely unknowledgeable about the supernatural. They would send crews out on Halloween with the assumption that all the creatures of the night would hunt then, when really they find the whole thing a bit gauche and stay in. This helps demonstrate the difference between the Watchers Council and the Initiative, old knowledge versus new. Despite all the random spooks including skeletons, ghosts, bats, and werewolves, this is the final episode of the series that doesn't feature a vampire, friendly or otherwise. There had previously been 6 episodes without the titular characters, but from here on, no more. It's also the third and last Halloween episode. Overall, it's a fantastic demonstration of Buffy at its best, with a good mix of horror, humor, human relationships, and supernatural phenomena. While it's not perfect, with a bit of odd pacing in the first act, overall it's one of the better of the season,